It's time for episode 95 of The Crisis Show here on Google Hangouts, on YouTube, and wherever else you have this link around the world. Tonight, developments, really breaking news out of Ferguson, Missouri, including the just announced resignation of the police chief there that follows the resignation of the city manager last night. Next up after that, we're going to look at the fraternity at the University of Oklahoma and that controversy. And finally, once again, Hillary Clinton. I'm so glad to be joined tonight. First of all, my name is Rich Klein. I'm president of Rich Klein Crisis Management in New York and founder and host of The Crisis Show. And really pleased to have with me tonight Trip Froelichtein. He's the president of Media Masters, a former news editor at a CBS-owned affiliate in St. Louis, KMOX, a very experienced PR crisis management person in the St. Louis area. Trip Froelichtein, nice to see you again. How are you?
Nice to be here. I'm feeling great. Thank you.
Great. So, Trip, why don't we do this? Because we really we don't get this opportunity often. The news conference is going on right now. I'm going to hit the play button for our audience, and we'll if they can't hear it, we'll fill them in a little bit. This is James Knowles.
Process and when you decide to make an exit.
Mayor, we talked about wanting to keep the police department. Have you all said at this point, given what the Justice Department wants to do, will the city be able to, fulfill those commitments and keep the department? And obviously, there's type of financial does it go?
Those are recommendations.
Oh, I guess we can't share it. I thought we could. Hello? You still there, Trip?
I'm here.
Yeah, we had a problem with we tried to share it, they wouldn't let us. But basically, folks, I'll give you a quick update. The official announcement of the police chief in Ferguson was just announced by Ferguson Mayor James Knowles. Of course, this follows the Department of Justice report released. What was it, last week, Trip, or the week? I think early last week, and a lot of news coverage. Obviously, a lot of focus still on Ferguson. So, Trip, you are about 15 minutes in Ferguson. Maybe you can help us understand some of the chronology, kind of walk us through what's happened since the release of the DOJ report, and why do you think it took so long for these resignations to happen, if they were long at all?
Well, yeah, they were long, and let me start with the second question because I think that's really significant. What we're seeing is very typical of crises like this, and that is that people, for whatever reason, think they can get through it. I want to go way back, though. The mayor, not the mayor, the police chief, everybody thought was going to resign right after the problems happened in August, and then they thought it would happen again right before the verdict, or the grand jury decision, I should say, would be announced. In fact, privately, I learned that he had told Senator Claire McCaskill that he was going to resign on a Friday. By Monday, he had changed his mind. And apparently, Mayor Knowles was involved in convincing of that. That all secondhand source, if you will. Then, of course, the report comes out, and people are, again, wondering, why hasn't he already resigned? And it's hard to explain. I think people feel like they can just keep bearing with it, or it's going to go away. In fact, he doesn't really resign until the 19th. He's announced it today, but he's going to be there another 8 days, which is also kind of incredulous when you think about it. So this keeps happening. John Shaw, the city manager who resigned yesterday, was clearly instrumental in the report in terms of being accused of all kinds of bad things. He's denied them, but resigned. The other three of the other people who went, a couple were actually fired, and then one resigned, or maybe one fired, two resigned. But the point is, it's taking way too long, and what's happening is this keeps dragging out the story. So it's, instead of like being a one-day story, here's a bunch of people, they resigned, now they're starting again. Ferguson is bringing upon itself story after story after story. Somebody pointed out here in St. Louis that the word Ferguson has been above the fold on the St. Louis Post-Dispatch virtually every day since this happened way back in August. So what we're looking at, again, is people who really don't understand the dynamics of a crisis, and apparently the people helping them, one of the PR people is an ex-television reporter who, by the way, wasn't very good. I'm also a TV critic at times, and I had not written very kindly about this guy, and now he's coaching the people in Ferguson. So it's just, it just keeps piling on.
Yeah, and what's also interesting, and I'm kind of just catching up the last day or two on this, the municipal judge, Ronald Brockmeyer, also stepped down, and there's been a whole lot of talk about the legal system going beyond the police department, and so this goes a lot deeper. And maybe you could explain to the best of your ability how is that going to work now? There's been some bunch of cases that used to be in the municipal court are now going to be transferred to a circuit court. Can you tell us about that?
Well, I think an appeals court judge has been assigned to Ferguson, basically, and he is going to take care of all this. But I'm not really clear on all the details, other than they're trying to make the court has stepped in to try to make substantive changes and help people understand that maybe not everybody's against them, because there's no question there were abuses in the system. Several of the communities on the north side of St. Louis County have been accused of really using African Americans primarily to fund the cities, or to play a big part of that, and unfairly so. And a lot of that was detailed in the DOJ report. By the way, speaking of the Department of Justice report, it's kind of interesting because since it's been released, people's opinions really haven't seemed to change much. It's kind of like you believe what you want to believe and you don't believe others. And there was an interesting tweet that I saw just today about one person who said, well, Darren Wilson is free. In other words, Michael Brown's killer is still out there, but at least they know that the Ferguson situation, based on the other part of the Justice Department report, is terrible. So in other words, if you agree with it, if that's what you thought ahead of time, you're still saying, oh yeah, that's right, Ferguson's terrible. Oh, but if you thought that Darren Wilson, despite the fact he was exonerated in the report, yet another federal report, you don't agree with that one. It's just kind of interesting to see how people are pretty much ignoring the reports in a lot of ways, locally at least.
Yeah, I also found it interesting from what I read, the division of public opinion surrounding the police officer and the non-indictment there, and what's happened by the DOJ, right?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question.
Sure. No, the division of there's a bunch of people out there, from what I read in some polls, that they agreed with the decision not to indict the police officer, but at the same time agree that this was the right decision for the DOJ to go in.
Yeah, there are several people who look at it that way, but there's still several others originally involved who are still saying, I don't believe the report on Darren Wilson, but I do believe the report on Ferguson, or vice versa. I don't believe the report on Ferguson, less of that, but I do.
Right. Thank you. Yeah, exactly. So it's really interesting, and one of the things that occurs to me, Tripp, early in my career, I worked for the Anti-Defamation League. I was the head of media relations and did a lot of work in fighting bigotry and exposing this kind of thing. And I have to wonder, Ferguson, of course, has gotten so much attention here. But you have to wonder, for the folks out there, those of you in local government and police chiefs and public information officers, there are probably other Fergusons out there. And we haven't heard about them yet.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, the recent shooting in Madison, Wisconsin, there's a lot of it out there. Ferguson represents, I'm afraid, the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot of this clearly that goes on. A lot of racism still out there. We're going to discuss SAE coming up. I mean, sadly, it's endemic in our society, or at least in a good part of our society. And I don't know if you saw Jon Stewart last night, by the way, but he had a fascinating look at and just at how hypocritical we could be. This is a slightly different thing, but it had to do with the Iran and what the senators.
Yes, yeah.
And how and this is how we are. But what happened was, right, all the Republicans are defending the 47 senators who wrote the letter. Democrats are condemning it. But when the Democrats did it in 2000,
hold on a second, just for viewers' benefit, for people not following. This is the letter, folks, that 47 Republican senators wrote to the leaders of Iran, saying basically that they have to approve any deal, any nuclear deal, disarming with Iran, right? That was the crux of it.
Correct. But in 2007, I think it was, Nancy Pelosi met with the president of Syria, and it was exactly the opposite. Then the Democrats said, she should be able to do this, and the Republicans said, no, that's terrible, you shouldn't mess with the president, let him do it. So the hypocritical nature, sadly, of our society is really showing in a lot of ways. And even though that's not racism, we're seeing the same kind of thing when it comes to these issues, and it's very sad.
Yeah.
In fact, it was the Republicans, pardon me for interrupting, but it was the Republicans, if you look back, who were the ones who were responsible more than the Democrats for passing the Civil Rights Act. And that was another thing that Stewart did. He showed all the Democrats back in the 60s saying segregation is the way to go.
Yeah, that is an amazing thing that most people who don't follow stuff pay attention to. It's absolutely true when you look back on the history, and it's just amazing how things have changed over the years with the parties. Yeah, so in terms of Ferguson, though, you've been watching this. I know you've done some media training with some people peripheral to Ferguson who are, somewhat connected to this. What are some of the criticisms you have and some of the compliments you have about how this has been handled by various officials, local officials, of course, along the way? Because our audience, we hope that for people watching, some local government officials who may be faced with maybe not a Ferguson, but even something like this, it only takes one bad apple to mess things up for your reputation as a local government, right? So tell me about what you've analyzed over the last year or so. Actually, it's not a year now, right? Since Ferguson, however long it's been since the initial shooting.
It was just August that all this has happened since. I think the most important lesson, and it's one that you've talked about before, Rich, and that is speed is a weapon. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but to react, you have to react much more quickly in this day and age, especially of social media, as things spread. For example, the DOJ report came out, and it took a day for the Mayor Knowles, to come out and say anything, and he issued a statement or read a 6-minute statement, but wouldn't take questions. It was like, wow, how embarrassing is that? What are you hiding? That's always the feeling. The fact that people weren't immediately leaving the city government after that came out is...
I actually want to jump in here for a sec, because I happen to have up the Associated Press story the day that came out, and it's exactly what you're saying. It says, the city of Ferguson issued a statement acknowledging the DOJ officials supplied a copy of the report to the mayor, to the city manager, police chief, and city attorney during a private meeting Tuesday in downtown St. Louis. The statement offered no details about the report, which the city said it was reviewing and would discuss Wednesday after the DOJ makes it public. So great point on that. Very slow to respond. And you're absolutely right. Today, it's not even especially social media. Social media is the news. If you're not getting something out, even a one-liner, people think you're hiding, right?
Absolutely. I mean, even if you're not, it's that impression that you are, the perception. As soon as you say no comment, you're hiding something. In fact, one of the things I do in my training is say, don't use the word comment. Say, we can't talk about that, and give a reason. We can't talk about it because it's going to court now, or it's a personnel issue, and we're not allowed to talk about it, those kinds of things. But in Ferguson, I mentioned the mayor. I think he's getting some weak advice from the people who are helping him. But the fact that a lot of people are calling for his resignation.
That was my next question, yeah.
Why is he staying? Is it an ego thing? Does he truly believe he can solve the problem? Because he has become the face of the problem, whether he likes it or not. And I think sometimes people forget to look at it from the angle of the audience. They're only looking at it from their own point of view. I think that when we get to Hillary, we'll be talking about the same kind of thing, where I'm not sure Hillary gets how she's being seen or perceived with what's going on. And we'll get to that later. But the idea in terms of a crisis, though, for any community or any company, and it's basic. You've said it, I've said it, and yet it still doesn't get done, and that is prepare. Have a crisis plan, have training. And when I say a plan, it's guidelines, really, because you never know what's going to happen. You don't know shooting and embezzlement, who knows what it's going to be. But have some sort of plan, know who the spokespeople are, and be able to react quickly so that you can stem this negative publicity. I mean, there are those who are contending, and I don't know that it'll happen like this, that Ferguson may not exist in a year or two.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I just want to get back to pick up on what you said. You made some very good points. I want to just add to them a little bit, Trip. And that is, when you are a town supervisor, a mayor of a small city or big city, when you're faced with a crisis, it's a golden opportunity, actually. If you are about ego and about your own reputation, how you handle that crisis is going to be the way that the public looks at you going forward. And it really was, I think, repeated missed opportunities by this mayor and other people in his administration to not take advantage of that when it hit them. Again, it goes back to what you said. They were caught off guard. There's protests in the streets. Every night, international media is at your doorstep filming these things, and they just were overwhelmed, right?
Well, they were overwhelmed. You're right. They weren't prepared for it. But they've also forgotten a really important fact, and that is a crisis. Remember the old saying, and it's technically not really true, but there's the old saying or idea that the Chinese symbol for crisis is made up of two other symbols, danger an opportunity.
That's right.
And there is an opportunity because you're going to be judged normally, well, as they say in Washington, it's not the crime that kills you, it's the cover-up. Well, you're not going to be judged on the event. What happened to Michael Brown was truly tragic, no matter whose fault it was. The fact that a kid had to die is sad. It's an awful thing. But once that has happened, you're going to be judged on how you handle the situation. And I think that Ferguson and others have been judged very harshly. I mean, when the riots broke out, when the announcement came, and the National Guard didn't step in because the governor didn't do what he said he was going to do. Now, he is the anger toward the governor here in Missouri, from both parties, by the way, is intense. And a guy who just a year ago was being talked about as a potential vice presidential, maybe even presidential candidate, he's toast. Because nobody's they're gonna look at what he did and say, no, this guy can't handle leadership. So it was it wasn't the crisis that got him, but it was how he handled the crisis. And that's an important lesson for all. And that's why if you're prepared for a crisis, if you handle it well, that doesn't mean people are going to go, oh, you're wonderful, but they're going to say, okay, I can I understand what happened. You guys are handling it right. It shouldn't have happened in the first place, but thank you for doing the right thing. And by the way, that's the best advice in a crisis, is do the right thing for the affected parties, not for yourself, but for the affected parties. A lot of corporations, cities will instead kind of like put up the circle the wagons and defend themselves versus thinking, how can we do the right thing, which if we do, the public is going to say, good, you're doing the right thing, keep it up. Now, there's a lot of one side mark here, because I'm generalizing at a high level, and that is this is a very faction kind of issue, because you have, as we've talked about, I think the last time we talked, if you watch Fox, Darren Wilson was the guy who was being beat up in all this, and if you watched MSNBC, it was all about Michael Brown and how mistreated he was.
Yeah, great point.
So you're not going to please everybody, and that's something you just have to remember. What you want to do is, if you do the right thing, hopefully that middle ground is going to shift your direction, because the extremes there are going to be people who are never going to change their mind.
Great point. Okay, well, I think we'll wrap up on Ferguson. Thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you for wrapping up on Ferguson. We've had enough of it here. Like I said,
well, that's why I wanted to have you on, because I always try to get people on who are closer to it than I am, obviously, and you certainly gave us a lot of help here. And for those of you watching, we're going to put up some links on our website at thecrisisshow.com with some related information about all these segments we're doing today, so you can get some more information. But let's now talk about the situation with Sigma Alpha Epsilon, if I have it pronounced right. This is one of the largest North American social college fraternities in the country. Founded, I think, in 1856 at the University of Alabama. I'm just reading from Wikipedia now because this has helped me today. They've initiated more than 325,000 members since their inception, and approximately 15,000 active undergraduate members at 200. Oh, actually, let me just stop that because it's poorly written. Anyway, it's one of the largest fraternities in the country. And this week, of course, for those of you who have been paying attention, this racist video happened on a bus with this fraternity. They used the N-word. It got a lot of attention online, and again, because of social media, this thing did get out. And I have to say, Trip, that my quick thought on this is that the president of the University of Oklahoma thus far has done a good job getting out in front of this as best as he can, making a very strong zero-tolerance policy. His name is David Boren, by the way, for those of you following him on Google or anywhere else. He did a press conference, he did a statement. I also saw him on MSNBC yesterday, and I think he handled it very well. But what I wanted to address here, Trip, is this idea, and I, like you, have advised universities and colleges on this kind of thing, that these are the kind of situations that can hurt your reputation. The one bad apple syndrome, the one bad fraternity syndrome. And this fraternity, by the way, has had a history of problems across the country with hazing, with drinking, and sexual harassment. So this is not a first, but it puts University of Oklahoma in the spotlight, right? So let's talk about this a little bit. How do you think that from what you've seen, the university is handling it so far?
Well, I'm going to agree with you. I think the university is handling it really well. And I say that because the president of the university was firm. He was, pardon my language, he was pissed, and you could see it. And we just talked about the fact it's not the event, it's how you handle it. I think a lot of people are going to look at the University of Oklahoma and say, hey, these guys are doing the right thing. This is a good, they're handling it right. The fact that he said, you're closed by midnight, what was it last night, I think, everybody's out of there by midnight last night. They took definitive action. They didn't form a commission to study the problem or anything. They just said, you're gone. And I thought it was a really positive move, a very smart move. And the focus, I don't think, is on the University of Oklahoma right now. I think he's going to save their reputation, and everything is moving to the SAE group, and they have a bigger problem because I often say words and deeds have to match. They keep saying that they won't tolerate discrimination, but you yourself pointed out that they have had lots of problems in the past. In fact, you mentioned Washington University. There was a big story on that last night here in the local news talking about the fact, and by the way, people didn't want to talk from the ex-members, of course, from the fraternity about it. But the fact is, in 2013, there was a racist problem here, so they suspended the fraternity. And there have been several other incidents, racial incidents, not to mention sexual harassment and other things this fraternity has. So when the leadership says we don't tolerate that, yeah, they have been tolerating it for a long time, and I don't trust them. Do I trust the president of the University of Oklahoma the way he handled it? You bet. Do I trust the as a viewer, do I trust the fraternity? Not a bit.
Yeah, and I would just add, thank you for that. I would just add to that for those of you out there in higher education management, presidents of universities, administration people, this is something to pay attention to, whether it's a situation like this or other kinds of crisis situations. I have to disagree with you slightly here, Tripp. For people who don't follow this story as closely as folks like you and I, it's still University of Oklahoma in that headline that they have to battle. They still have that reputation issue. I agree with you, they did everything right, and it's going to take some time to remove the university's association with this fraternity. Just that because of the world we live in, and because everything is, as Hillary Clinton has learned, is archived online, this is a situation that university presidents and administration need to prepare for. And this is, again, a great case study of how to do it right.
Well, it is, although, by the way, everything for Hillary, as we'll discuss, is not archived, and that's going to be another problem for her. But in this case, the reason I say what I'm saying, and I'm going to contend that even people not following it, this is moving away from the University of Oklahoma, and the reason being the other incidents. I mean, the Clemson chapter was suspended in December, right, where they hosted a party where white students dressed to resemble mostly black street gangs. Really smart there. The SA members of the University of Arizona were accused of breaking into a Jewish frat last year, yelling discriminatory comments and physically assaulting students. We mentioned Washington U, University of Memphis, it's happened. So there's a history of this SAE thing, and I think that's why the story is going to shift to SAE and not to the university. If it was an isolated incident there, then you begin to wonder about the whole atmosphere at the university. Now we're wondering about this fraternity.
Yeah, it's 2 points on it. Thank you for that. 2 points. One is if I'm doing crisis management or PR for the university, I am going to make sure all the reporters covering this have that list. And in fact, I found on Wikipedia there was a very long list dating back many years about the problems and with this fraternity across the country. So that's what I would do, just as I've sent it as a fact sheet, if you will. But I also because I forgot to do it earlier, I want to read part of the statement from David Boren because I think it's a good lesson in writing this kind of statement. And he writes, I have emphasized that there is zero tolerance for this kind of threatening racist behavior at the University of Oklahoma. I hope that the entire nation will join us in having zero tolerance of such racism when it raises its ugly head in other situations across our country. I am extremely proud of the reaction and response expressed by our entire university family, students, faculty, staff, and alumni about this incident. They are real Sooners, and that's Sooners is the mascot, of course, for those of you who don't know, who believe in mutual respect for all. I hope that students involved in this incident will learn from this experience and realize that it is wrong to use words to hurt, threaten, and exclude other people. We will continue our investigation of all the students engaged in the singing of this chant. Once their identities have been confirmed, they will be subject to appropriate disciplinary action, which, of course, he announced he was going to do it, and then he did it.
And that, that's words and deeds matching. And by the way, while you were talking, I went onto Twitter and I've been looking at several of the items. They're not picking on OU. They're picking on SAE. So I think that they may have done this right. In fact, there are a few people complimenting OU for their efforts. So given the world of social media, whoever worked with the university, smart.
Yeah, and I just want a final thought on this segment, Trip. There's been some talk. I didn't really read deeply into the stories, but there was a question in some of the reports about the free speech issue. Should these guys have been suspended? As horrible as it is, right? My take on it, as a crisis manager, is, you know what? I would agree totally with what he did. Deal with the legal issue later. That's something you can live with if you've done the right thing ethically and morally, I think.
Well, I agree. I think free speech is one thing, but hurtful speech is not. And I think there are even laws that will draw the line there, yeah. Rich, where people, it's like you can say so much before. No, you can't. That's beyond free speech. And I think if you analyze it, free speech has a lot more to do with government specifically anyway.
Yeah, people do confuse that. And I just want to close one last thought on this, Trip, because, again, we talked about social media. Below this statement on this website I'm looking at, it's actually KOCO of Oklahoma City. It's happy to be looking at it. And below that is a screenshot of the tweet from David Boren. I have acted today to expel 2 students who were leaders in the singing of a racist chant. See press release. Perfect. Perfect tweet. So it's the press statement and then reinforcing it on social media. He has his own Twitter account. So really smart crisis PR thus far by the university. I give them credit because we don't often see this, right? We've seen other incidents similar in nature, maybe not the fraternities, but we had big high-profile situation with Rutgers University a few years ago. You had the Sandusky scandal at the University of Pennsylvania, where the communications were not moving as fast as they should have, and the crisis management was very slow. So just to contrast this handling with those other 2, I think is interesting as well.
I think you're absolutely right, and that's a lesson to universities. There is a way to do it right, but once again, you got to do the right thing. And clearly, in most people's opinion, they have. Are there a few people who don't agree? Yeah, there are a couple tweets that say, why punish the whole fraternity for a couple people? Although it was more than a couple. There were a whole lot of people on that bus chanting, and apparently it's more endemic than that. But the point is that most people are going to look at that and say, you know what, I trust that university, I trust that leadership, I'd send my kid there.
Yeah, and what's really interesting because of this world we live in with the video evidence and the social media, these 2 kids, I call them kids, 18, 19 years old, however old they are, I mean, this is going to be their legacy, despite the apology. This is not something you could erase. 20 years ago, maybe you could, cover something up like that. This is a permanent digital record of something horrible that they did, and what the heck were they thinking? Oh my gosh,
Well, one of those kids acknowledged that this was going to affect the rest of his life. The question, by the way, is who posted it? I do not know the facts, but one report I heard, and again, I'm not telling you this is real, one report was that it was supposedly a senior who posted it because he disagreed with what was going on, so he decided to post it online. Although, this is a quick aside, folks, when you shoot video, don't put your camera, don't shoot it like this, shoot like this, because nowadays everything is this way, it's not vertical. That vertical video, don't do it.
Yeah, and try to hold it steady or get one of those. They have little monopods for the camera. Yeah, it's true because every video we see, and I was watching another one today. There was another horrible thing here in New York. It was a really vicious beating of a student at some high school, and the video shaking like this. But yeah, I mean it's we live in a different world. Yesterday I saw the video on the local news here. Someone was being harassed, and it was sort of like the Bernie Getz case many years ago, and he followed the people who were harassing him and punched him, and he shot him. I mean, that was all captured on social media. The video was actually captured of the actual shooting. So it's good for law enforcement, but it's a different world we live in, certainly. So. And
it's a reminder to organizations, including corporations, that anytime you're in public, somebody could be taping you. So you might be doing a presentation at an industry conference, right, and blasting your competition. Well, in the old days, maybe somebody talked about it, but there's no proof of it. Now you have the proof of it with this.
Yeah, two words to just reaffirm that: Mitt Romney. And the number's 47%. That if you don't believe us, look what happened to Mitt over that. So yeah, absolutely, great point to wrap that segment up. Did you have any other further thoughts on this before we go to the next?
The only thought I have is that it's going to be interesting to see how SAE not only handles it, but what happens to SAE going forward. Is this going to just be another one that kind of dies off, or because of the nature of this one, is this going to be the one that really? And by the way, there is one more person involved in this one. That was the woman who was the house mother. And
oh my God, she's scary.
Well, but Larry Wilmore had an interesting take on it. Larry Wilmore, which now follows The Daily Show, and if you haven't watched it, I urge it. It's intelligent comedy. As good as Colbert was, he's good in a very different way and very intelligent. And he kind of said, apparently she claimed, and he believes, because they played the actual song, that she was singing along to a rap song in which that was the language that was used, the N-word. And then he played the song, and he kind of backed up and said, okay, she just maybe was having too much fun singing it. But other than that, she might be an innocent, not innocent, I mean, she got taped.
She got caught up in it.
Good way to put it, got caught up in it. But I don't think I could just get the feeling, even looking at her, I don't know that she's a bad person here, but she did get caught up in it, and it's too bad because she may have been singing to a song that was a rap song that was the words.
Yeah, and it raised another issue that I didn't plan on talking about, but maybe we could touch on it here because, that N-word is as horrible and distasteful, and, I've never used it, and I call people out when they do, no matter who they are. But some people would say, well, the rap music, black musicians use it in some of their songs. And my feeling is, why don't we all just stop using the word? Because it's horrible. There's no justification for it, and you don't help anything by using it. That's just my feeling.
I think that's hard we're two white guys talking about this now.
No, I understand that, but I'm being sensitive to it. But I think you have to have, we have become a very coarse society, and there's a lot of name calling, and it's not just the N-word. There's a lot of words that go around for different racial, ethnic, and religious groups, and they're all equally distasteful to me. And I think they encourage stereotyping, and they encourage bigotry, and they do encourage hate-filled violence. So I've always felt strongly about that. That's my personal opinion, and I'd like to see it stopped across the board. There's no excuse for it anywhere.
That's the ideal, but culturally among African Americans, and I've had this conversation with some African American friends, it's okay for an African American to call another African American that. You ever see The Wire? That was the HBO,
yeah.
Where they, that was common language from African American, but it was okay for them to call that to each other, but not okay for a white person to say it to an African American person. I'm not making a judgment. I'm just saying that's right now the way it is. Maybe your point is right.
I agree that's the way it is. I agree that that's the way it is, but I like to say I think we'd all be better off if we moved away from it. And if you can't find a better word to talk to your brothers and sisters, we have bigger problems in our society for sure. I just don't think it's healthy. But that's my only editorial opinion I'll make on that today. So, but thank you for sharing that. So okay, now let's get to that person who keeps parroting herself. What's her name? Hillary Clinton. Yes. Gosh, so much. Did a show last week. Maybe this was a part of the show. I didn't think we'd be talking about this a week later, but of course, after this news conference, this, as we call them, pressers, right? This presser that former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had yesterday at the United Nations. We have to talk about it. There's just so much meat there for you and I, and there's so much to learn from what she did here. I'm going to let you start. I'll give you my. What was your initial? I know you looked at the 20-minute news conference. For those of you who've been hiding under a stone, this issue goes to the fact that Hillary Clinton had her own email server while Secretary of State, and she used her personal email address. I think it was a Gmail address. I'm not sure. A personal email address to communicate to other State Department officials to conduct business. She claimed yesterday during the press conference that she just didn't want the inconvenience of carrying two iPhones or two devices. So, actually, why don't we listen? Do you mind if we listen to a little bit of this first?
Please.
Okay, let me just cue it up. I think it will be interesting to watch a little bit of the opening because I want to talk about body language here in presentation as well. So hang on a second.
Good afternoon. I want to thank the United Nations for hosting.
I'm going to just fast forward a little
bit. This week makes clear, despite all this progress, when it comes to
she was
as brightly today as it did 20 years ago.
She was talking about other issues, so I'm just trying to fast forward a little bit.
Including those senators in that letter. She didn't like that.
A diplomatic solution that would close off all must judge any final agreement on its merits. But the recent letter from Republican senators was out of step with the best traditions of American leadership. And one has to ask, what was the purpose of this letter? There appear to be two logical answers. Either these senators were trying to be helpful to the Iranians or harmful to the commander-in-chief in the midst of high-stakes international diplomacy. Either answer,
Rich?
discredit.
Pause that for a second.
You want to talk about this first?
No, I want viewers to notice something. Notice her eye contact as she reads her statement. She never looks to the middle, or almost never looks to the middle. She looks to the left or the right, and that's a reminder for people when you hold news conferences. Very often the cameras are in the middle. She has not made eye contact with the camera. She's looking.
Oh yeah, I have a lot to say about that, and let me get into it.
Okay. I apologize.
No, great observation. It's one of my things. Yeah.
Now I would be pleased to talk more about this important matter, but I know there have been questions about my email, so I want to address that directly, and then I will take a few questions from you. There are four things I want the public to know. First, when I got to work as Secretary of State, I opted for convenience to use my personal email account, which was allowed by the State Department, because I thought it would be easier to carry just one device for my work and for my personal emails instead of two. Looking back, it would have been better if I'd simply used a second email account and carried a second phone, but at the time, this didn't seem like an issue. Second, the vast majority of my work emails went to government employees at their government addresses, which meant they were captured and preserved immediately on the system at the State Department. Third, after I left office, the State Department asked former secretaries of state for our assistance in providing copies of work-related emails from our personal accounts. I responded right away and provided all my emails that could possibly be work-related, which totaled roughly 55,000 printed pages, even though I knew that the State Department already had the vast majority of them. We went through a thorough process to identify all of my work-related emails and deliver them to the State Department. At the end, I chose not to keep my private personal emails about planning Chelsea's wedding or my mother's funeral arrangements, condolence notes to friends, as well as yoga routines, family vacations, the other things you typically find in inboxes. No one wants their personal emails made public, and I think most people understand that and respect that privacy. Fourth, I took the unprecedented step of asking that the State Department make all my work-related emails public for everyone to see. I am very proud of the work that I and my colleagues and our public servants at the department did during my 4 years as Secretary of State. And I look forward to people being able to see that for themselves. Again, looking back, it would have been better for me to use 2 separate phones and 2 email accounts. I thought using one device would be simpler, and obviously it hasn't worked out that way. Now I'm happy to take a few questions.
All right, let's hold it there for a minute.
He's not happy to take questions, I assure you.
No, no. I actually, well, so much to talk about here. I'm going to pick. Well, I want to pick up on your point, which is something that I tweeted out about yesterday, the eye contact. And if you're not going to look at the media, look at your audience. And in a televised news conference, and I know you're the expert on this from your news days at a television station, but look directly in the camera like I am right now. I think I am. If you're going to look down like this and up, you're just not convincing. And eye contact is so critical. And remember also, for those of you watching, government officials, CEOs, whoever you are out there in business, the audience isn't necessarily the media. If you're at a televised news conference and a high-profile conference like this, and you are the assumed candidate of your party for president of the United States, you want to talk directly to the people. And the way to do that is to look directly into the camera rather than going like this. I think so. That's the one thing. The other thing is her whole body language just did not seem, if this is our future, it just seemed weak. And the other thing that I observed in the body language, Trip, is at the end of this news conference, and then, by the way, we'll post this so people can look at it for themselves in full. One of her aides came up to her and basically grabbed her little notebook and escorted her off. Like, I can't wait to get you out of here. That was not a good optic in my view at all. She should leave when she's ready to leave. You don't push somebody off the stage unless they're totally screwing up. I just think it made her look weak. And I would say that if she was a man as well. This is not a sexist comment at all. I think it just made her look extra weak as a potential president of the United States.
We haven't discussed this in advance, but I have a note about that because it was getting really testy when this happened. So it was like, we got to get her off and protect her before it gets worse. And because it was already getting bad, I have some other thoughts on that. I want to go back to your first comment. Yeah. You're right. You want to look at the camera. Now, if you have press there, you have to look around a little bit, but you'll notice she never looks straight ahead. I don't think ever in that thing. She would look up occasionally and then over, but she didn't look straight. And here's my line. You're not talking to the media. You're talking through the media.
That's right.
So that's what you want to think about, is talking to the public. At the end, by the way, there's another interesting thing, since we're not talking content quite yet, and that is...
We're going to get to that too, yeah.
But she had a lot of uhs. The deeper we got into the news conference, the more uhs she had, the more pressing the questions, the more uhs she had. And it was clearly, she's out of practice. And just this weekend, I went to dinner with some friends who are Democrats, and they were Hillary supporters until recently, and they're thinking, you know what, maybe she's not the answer after all. I think Hillary may have peaked already in terms of this particular upcoming election. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I think there are a lot of Democrats who are disillusioned with what they're seeing out of this Hillary Clinton. She's not that dynamic dynamo that we expected, and she's kind of old-fashioned, more of the, and which is why it would be, as one person said to me recently, if it's Bush against Clinton, it's like, I don't want to vote for either of them. I'm just going to, I don't want to vote. I don't care. That's the past. We got to go on. So We'll see what happens.
Yeah. I lost my train of thought for a second. You make a good point about, I know what to say. So we talked about it. I think you just mentioned that she was out of practice, and...
I want to hear what good point I made. No, I'm kidding.
Well, you made a point of my feeling is this. This is a woman who's been in the public spotlight and public life since probably the early 90s. Actually, Bill became president in 92. He was governor for how many years before that in Arkansas. So we're talking about somebody who's been in public service and public life since at least the late 1980s. It's a lot of years. Not to mention her time as a state senator from my home state of New York and then Secretary of State. And when you get paid millions of dollars for a book and for every speech you give, you can afford you and me around the clock, frankly, as media trainers. There was no excuse for this kind of performance. Now, I know that the reporting on this probably may have caught her off guard, and maybe she thought that she can get through it. A couple of things I want to back up on this. When she first tweeted out that she is kind of looking forward to the State Department. I've asked the State Department to release the emails. It was a very strange tweet. And I said to myself at that moment, I think I tweeted out about that, you can't do that late on a Friday night and just think the story's going to go away, which is what I think she thought.
That's
One
when you
of-
bury stories. Is Friday night? That's the myth anyway, and it used to work.
It doesn't work anymore. It doesn't work. That's the old days before the internet. And one of the reasons she had to do this news conference trip, and I knew eventually she would have to, is because her supporters, the people you're talking about who have supported her, they needed cover to defend her on the networks, in the media, because she is the presumed candidate, and unless or until someone else steps forward. So it puts a lot of Democrats in a very tough position. And you know darn well that if this was a Republican, you know, they'd be attacking them for the same thing. And this is just the way our system works in this country. So that was just really interesting. Those couple of things were interesting. Your point's very well taken about her eye contact. But let's again. I'm sorry. Do you want to?
Before you go, I want to follow up on what you just said. When you talk about people defending her, it has not. They're not defending her in the same way. First of all, both MSNBC and Fox have attacked her for the way she's handling this. This is kind of unusual that we are seeing some unification.
Sure. Yeah,
but I watched Dianne Feinstein defend her yesterday, and you got the feeling she's doing it because she had to, not because she believed in Hillary. It's kind of like you just said, we got to provide cover. Even today, the president, the president's spokesperson, said that people, when they asked about it, said, well, people have to decide for themselves if she's responsibly handled the situation, as opposed to, oh yeah, she's doing the right thing. You're kind of letting her go.
Yeah, and I would just pick up on the thank you for that reminder, because if I'm a crisis manager to the White House, she's, I don't like to use the word throw under the bus, but she's on her own. You know, I would not have tried to defend her because that news, even the other, I think it was yesterday or the day before, there was just so many questions about Hillary. It took the White House off its own message if this is what they have to talk about. And that's not what the White House should be talking about at a news briefing by Josh Earnest, certainly. So that's good that they moved on. They were saying referring back to her, I think is what they said. Just very, and I know we just talked about eye contact and body language. Just for the benefit of our viewers, these are just very basic things. Look into the camera, make eye contact, and speak more. She didn't really speak with confidence. She was like shrugging her shoulders, like, well, maybe I should have done it differently. Didn't look like a leader up there, and she has in the past, so I'll give her credit. She's off her game for whatever reason. There are some people out there, Tripp, that said, well, she doesn't have a formal campaign staff yet, and that's why that may be part of it, but come on. You make all that money, you could hire private help, no excuse in my view.
With the experience she has, if you don't know how to handle it right, even on your own now, yeah, should she have support, media training? Absolutely. There's no question. Somebody had to train her for that news conference, and whoever did it did a lousy job. Not only the us,
or she just didn't take the advice. But I hear you. I agree with you. It's probably
my favorite line, and I sent this to you yesterday, but my favorite line, there's a scary similarity here. Yes, she said, and I'm quoting now, I did not email any classified material to anyone on my email. Think back, 1990s, Bill Clinton. I did not have sex with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky. There's an eerie similarity here that's going to go up.
Yeah, whenever and I've worked with a lot of attorneys over the years. Whenever I hear somebody say I comply with the letter and the spirit, I get nervous. It's like it's attorney talk, right? We comply with the letter and the spirit of the law. And what that says to me as a layperson, what are you hiding? So that's a phrase I would completely stay away from. And I don't care what attorneys say. I think from public opinion standpoint, it just reeks of guilt or hiding something.
And another thing you want to avoid, Rich, is repeating negatives. I did not have sex with that woman, Ms. Lewinsky, is repeating the negative. When you repeat negative allegations, that's what gets remembered. So instead of saying, I did not email classified blah, 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 she say, I want you to know the only things I emailed were things that were unclassified. I kept it up above board. I mean, I'm not wording it quite right, but you get the drift. It's going to be a positive kind of statement versus repeating the negative, which immediately, as you just said, brings up the thoughts of guilt. And part of the problem for her, though, is that she has a history of these things. I mean, of mistakes like this. Remember when she said that she and Bill were dead broke?
Right. Yes, I do remember that. Trying to relate to the common. That was during the campaign, I think, the last campaign, right? Trying to relate to the common folks, right? Dead broke, and then you go find out what she's making in every speech. Incredible.
Right. She had like $5 million. Diane Sawyer pressed her and came up with the fact that she had made $5 million in speaking fees. So if you're dead broke at $5 million, I'd like to have your problem.
Yeah, thank you. So would I. Yeah. Let's talk.
What I'm getting though is part of this is that she's going to lose the trust of a lot of people. Like, and a lot of both sides again have said this. She said, I'll pick out which emails I release and which I don't. People don't trust her. She won't release her server, which makes people, even to an independent person, which makes people think, wait a second, if she's not releasing her server, which has those emails on it, what is this woman hiding? And I think this is more significant than just a bump in the road. I think this could be a very significant hurt in her drive for a presidential run, which could open it up for somebody who knows who yet that we don't know that's out there.
Yeah, I think I mentioned on the show last week, we were talking about this, and it struck me because I watch a lot of different political stuff. I love watching it. I watched the CPAC conference, at least highlights from it, and they're all fighting over each other out there. And here we are. We have a two-party system. The other party's got 15 candidates, all trying to get some attention. And here we are, and there's Hillary Clinton and big maybe, Joe Biden, and he's got his own problems with, some of the memes out there. So, it's just that's striking to me, political system that here we are, and no one has stepped up. But maybe that's going to change. I think that'll be interesting, Don't
forget that's what we thought in 2008. Hillary had it locked up, and
that's right.
Has been president against her for many years now. But it'll be interesting to see what happens. But you're right. The problem is she is not very presidential in how she's handled this, and especially for the independent environment. If you have pure Democrats, pure Republicans, they're going to vote for their candidate no matter who. They're going to mark that ballot the way they want. But that huge middle ground could easily be swayed by saying, I don't trust that woman now with all of these things that we're talking about today.
Yeah, and that would be a benefit to a moderate Republican who moves forward as the campaign goes on. That would be an advantage to someone less to the right and more to the center, I think. But let's talk about some of the content here. There's so much to talk about. Not just what she said in this 20 minutes. She released, for those of you who I didn't know this till today. She released a 9-page fact sheet. Q&A written by her, aides about what she's saying transpired. So when I'm watching this news conference yesterday, Trip, there was one thing that just jumped out at me, and I just grabbed it and I said, this is going to be her downfall. And she said, I'm going to keep my server private. That's
what we just mentioned. You're right.
That was the headline to me. Immediately, I jumped on that and I said, whoa, because she already has a trust issue. The Clintons have had this trust issue, as popular as they are. She's basically saying, just trust me. That I deleted the stuff I was supposed to delete. And you don't really want to know about Chelsea's wedding or yoga, which I thought was kind of silly anyway, thrown in. But that I was actually hoping, as a crisis manager, that she said, look, I have the server. It's not good for the trees. We printed out all these papers, so
a lot of trees died for those 55,000 pages.
How can you be a pro-environment candidate if you spend 55,000 pages on emails? But seriously though, the turning over the server, and that would have helped her cause a little bit, right? If she had said, I'm going to hand it over to an arbitrator, mediator, a retired judge, an independent person to analyze this. Because what she said yesterday was, hey, I carry 2 devices because other people have done it. I do what other federal employees do. But when you're running for president, we want you to have a higher bar for ethics and integrity, right? So I think that's what was lost here. You don't compare yourself to the thousands of other federal employees. You're running for president. You're the former Secretary of State. We're going to hold you to a higher standard. And it's not easy. It's a very tough place to be. But she knew that because her husband was president twice and he was governor. So this is not some rookie person trying to become president. This is somebody who's seasoned in political battles and crisis situations. So I was, surprised that someone with her experience was this unprepared, Trip.
The fact is, you say she's seasoned in these situations, but she doesn't look like it right now.
Yeah, at least by years of experience is what I meant. Yeah.
You're right, and she's not doing well. But I'm going to disagree with one area,
Yeah.
and that is I thought she was really smart to talk about the wedding and the funeral and some of the other things, because what she was trying to do was relate to everyday people. Like, hey, I'm just like you. I have a wedding to handle, or I have personal affairs that I don't want to make public because do I want to? So I think that was actually kind of smart.
Yeah, I mean, but she's what she's doing is, I agree with you on one point. She's trying to appeal to the privacy issue that all of us care about, which was smart. But on the other hand, we know she lives a different age. We know she lives a different lifestyle, and that doesn't change the questions about the questions about national security. And I think she's covered on the classified part of it. But who else? Not having the common sense to to make sure this stuff was secure, and having your own server at home was just kind of bizarre. That just seems so secretive and so different than what you and I might do. Even though,
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. I apologize because of the delay.
Jump in.
I wanted to say that even the things she said about the State Department capturing it, all that, right before we came on the air here on the NBC nightly news, I was listening, and they were talking. There are officials now saying, well, maybe it wasn't actually captured because people aren't trained right or whatever. So those may be lost, except on her server, which she's not going to share, and we'll never know if she's not going to share it, whether she truly did provide everything or not. And again, maybe she did, but there's most people, like including me, are going to be skeptical about that because she gets to decide versus, as you just mentioned, turning it over to a third party would be a much smarter thing to do, who they can trust, maybe to say, okay, none of this will come out if it's personal. We won't see how much you spent on your daughter's dress. That's fine. That's private stuff. But the idea of her making that decision, I think it really is kind of scary to us, and another reason that people are going to lose faith in Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, basically what she's saying is just trust me. Just trust me because Hillary Clinton, and that's the problem. I think that some people are going to have with her. It's this putting herself above the common people while she's attempting to connect with, America, the American public. It's a disconnect too. That the rules don't apply similarly. And I think what's also interesting about this trip is, the political ramification of this. Trey Gowdy, who's the head of the House Select Committee on Benghazi. Yeah, yes, you could agree that the Republicans are going to, go after this. But I'm a Democrat, and I'm concerned about this. It certainly made me think about the integrity issue, which is for me what it's always been about. Yeah, and it's So it's she's gonna have these guys were gonna go after her anyway, and she just handed them a gift.
Yeah. Although, I know we don't have much time left, I'd like to read you a few things that I pulled offline following her news conference. And what's amazing is I couldn't find almost anything positive. It was almost all negative as I scanned. Now, not scientific, but here's some of the things. Like, why does this hypocrite accept huge donations from countries where the abuse of women is tolerated and in some cases applauded? Why can't women see Hillary for who she is? Another one said, 100% on the money with this. Hillary has one mind, herself. If you're explaining, you're losing. James Carville. Deflecting questions means only one thing. She's all lawyered up. She's toast. She's a liar. She's obviously incompetent. She's corrupt. Why would any sane person want this shill running our country? Parsing words about regulations, and I can keep going. There are people really upset about the server remaining private. It just goes on and on. Incredible negative stuff, and you get the feeling this isn't your normal partisan negative stuff. Like you said, as a Democrat, you're worried. This appears to be fairly universal, and I think she's in trouble.
Yeah, it looks like, I don't know if she's hired James Carville. He's been out there the last day or so, and this is an old, tired thing to do. He's blaming the media. He says that the media has swallowed right-wing talking points. By the way, that's he's married to one of the right-wing people who make those talking points. But yeah, he's ripping the media, and that's a non-starter for me. I just don't think that helps at all to blame the media. I mean, maybe he thinks that's going to help, but we're way beyond that. And I think that also kind of insults the intelligence of the American people to just say the media is making it up or the right wing's making it up. No, this is about personal responsibility and the way she handled this. And doesn't, it doesn't matter whether you violated any laws. It's the trust and integrity issue that she has to worry about to move forward in this campaign. What's on her side is that she still enjoys very high approval ratings, and there's no one really challenging her. So among Democrats, no problem. But like you said earlier, in a general election, those people who may be on the fence, it could be a problem.
I'd like to think that I'd like to see the approval ratings now, though, as this continues. I would bet money, and I haven't seen any, that they're dropping.
Yeah, and as they probably, as of yesterday, they were still high, but after the press conference, I'll have to take a look at that. Good point. But the larger point here, folks, is that you can't hide behind a tweet with a crisis like this, and when you're a high profile, forget about running for president. If you're a CEO of a company or the head of a business, you can't hide behind a crisis like this by just tweeting something out and saying, okay, it'll go away now. We're not in that world anymore. We can get away with, letting the newspaper having what we used to call a one-day story, right? It would go away, and the crisis would go away. But as you just pointed out with what's being said about her on Twitter and social media, in fact, it was the media and the social media that probably got her to the podium yesterday. It was that pressure. So, yeah. Anything I didn't realize how late it was. We went on. That was fun with the show. I think I'm not going to have enough to cover my hour, and here we are, 8 o'clock, and we could go on and on. So, anything else you want to add, Trip? I know I may have cut you off before, so feel free to close the loop.
No, I think that the real lessons from all of these is that a crisis doesn't necessarily mean it's your end. In fact, it can be very good for you, not good for you, not the crisis, but in how people look at you. We go back to the fact that Ferguson continues to look bad, Hillary looks bad, but and it's hurting people, it's affecting lives. But Oklahoma University, OU, looks good because although the fraternity looks bad, they have handled things right. So I think that's the real takeaway here, is that a crisis is not something to fear. In fact, it is something to look at, is how do we hate the fact that it's happened, okay, but how do we take advantage of it now in an honest, forthright, positive way by doing the right thing for affected parties. Beautiful.
And I'll just want to add that you're going to have a crisis. If you're a business owner or a government official, expect it. You don't want to welcome and say, come have a, you don't want to look for them, but they're going to happen. And so you have to, these are just great examples of what we gave tonight. A university, a government official, and a city government. These are just examples of things that happen every day around the world. And so look at these as case studies. Look at what these people and these leaders did right, what they did wrong, and learn from them. There's a lot of case studies out there, and we have many more of them online at The Crisis Show, thecrisisshow.com. This is our 95th episode. A lot of great information from people like Tripp, who's been on the show before, and others as well. If you want to comment on anything we said, please use hashtag #TheCrisisShow. Tripp, Froelich, thank you so much for being with me tonight. It was a great show. Insights are always welcome, and of course we'll have you back. You know that. So thank you, viewers, for watching. This is Rich Klein from New York, and thanks again. Have a good night. Take care, Tripp.
Take care. Thanks.